The great chamber on Nexus Prime buzzed with hundreds of different voices. Representatives from across the galaxy filled the massive hall, their varied forms creating a colorful display of alien life. Some floated in special tanks, others stood on multiple legs, and a few hung from the ceiling in energy fields. Despite their differences, they all shared one thing. They were here for the most important meeting of the galactic year. Elder Counselor Vextai moved slowly to the center podium. His ancient form showed the weight of thousands of years. The Cytherian race was among the oldest in the galaxy, and Vextai had seen more history than most entire civilizations. His 6 eyes swept across the gathered crowd as silence fell over the chamber. "Today we welcome the Zelthari Republic to our council," Vextai announced. His voice carried easily through the vast space, translated instantly into hundreds of languages. "But before we celebrate this moment, we must share with them the most sacred law that binds us all." In the Zelthari section, Supreme Chancellor Thexvar leaned forward with interest. His people had worked for decades to earn a place in the Galactic Council. They controlled 30 star systems and commanded one of the most powerful fleets in their region of space. The Zelthari saw themselves as natural leaders, destined to guide lesser species toward a better future. "The first rule of our council," Vextai continued, "written in the blood of ancient wars and sealed with the promise of peace, is this: never betray the humans." A ripple of confusion passed through the newer members of the council. The Zelthari delegation exchanged glances. They had studied every species in the galaxy during their application process. Humans were unremarkable. They controlled only a dozen worlds. Their technology seemed basic compared to other races. Their military was small and rarely used for anything beyond peacekeeping missions. Admiral Kolmesh, the Zelthari's top military commander, tapped his clawed fingers against his chair. He had read every report about human capabilities. Their ships were slow, their weapons outdated, and their soldiers seemed more interested in helping refugees than fighting wars. The idea that such a weak species needed special protection struck him as ridiculous. "I know what some of you are thinking," Vextai said, as if reading their minds. "The humans appear young to you, weak, unimportant. They joined our council only 300 years ago. Their territory is small, their military modest, their technology seemingly behind others. But appearances can deceive and memory can fade." Agent Yathara, a Zelthari spy who had spent months studying human space, felt particularly confident in her assessment. She had visited their worlds, watched their people, analyzed their defenses. Humans were peaceful to the point of being naive. They welcomed strangers, trusted easily, and seemed to believe that every problem could be solved through talking. Their children played games instead of training for war. Their leaders spent more time on art and philosophy than military planning. "The rule exists for a reason," Vextai warned. "It has kept peace in our galaxy for over 2,000 years. Some laws can be changed as times change. This one cannot. This one must not." Supreme Chancellor Thexvar listened politely, but inside he felt growing irritation. The Zelthari had built their empire through strength and smart planning. They had conquered worlds by understanding their enemies' weaknesses and striking at the right moment. The idea that they should fear a species that couldn't even protect its own trade routes from pirates seemed absurd. During a break in the ceremony, Thexvar met quietly with his advisors in a private chamber. The room was filled with holographic displays showing human territories, fleet positions, and resource production. Every chart reinforced the same conclusion: humans were not a threat to anyone. "The old races cling to ancient fears, Admiral," Kolmesh said, his voice filled with contempt. "They speak of rules written in blood, but whose blood? What war could humans have possibly won? Look at the evidence. Their largest ship is smaller than our escort vessels. Their most advanced weapon is technology we abandoned centuries ago." Agent Yathara nodded in agreement. "I have walked among them. They are soft. They spend their energy on helping the weak instead of becoming strong. Their military leaders are chosen for their wisdom, not their ruthlessness. They actually believe that every species in the galaxy wants peace." "Perhaps," Thexvar said slowly, This rule exists not to protect humans, but to protect others from learning how weak they really are. Think about it. If the galaxy knew how defenseless humans truly were, someone might be tempted to take their worlds. The Council might fear that such an action would destabilize their careful balance of power. The more they discussed it, the more sense this theory made. Humans controlled strategic trade routes between major sectors of the galaxy. Their worlds were rich in rare minerals that many species needed. Their position in space made them a perfect staging ground for anyone wanting to expand their territory. The sacred rule wasn't about respecting human strength. It was about preventing a scramble for human resources. We could change everything, Admiral Kolmesh suggested. The galaxy accepts human weakness because they believe this ancient rule protects them. But what if humans weren't around to need protection? What if other species were blamed for their disappearance? Pirates, perhaps. Or the Krillians. They're always fighting someone. Thexvar felt excitement building in his chest. The Zelthari. Republic could become the dominant force in the galaxy, but only if they moved carefully. A direct attack on humans would bring the wrath of the entire council. But if humans simply disappeared, due to unfortunate circumstances that had nothing to do with the Zelthari, then who could blame them for stepping in to maintain order in the region? We need more information, Thexvar decided. Study their defenses more carefully, find their weaknesses. Plan how we could make their destruction look like someone else's work. And remember, no one outside this room can know what we're considering. The old races take their ancient rules seriously, even if those rules no longer make sense. As the ceremony resumed, Vexatai spoke of friendship and cooperation between all species. He talked about the importance of trust and mutual respect. The crowd listened and applauded, believing they were witnessing the beginning of a new era of peace. Only the Zelthari delegation sat in silence, their minds already turning to plans of conquest and betrayal. They looked at the humans in the chamber, Ambassador Kang Wu, who smiled and nodded politely at everyone he met. He seemed so harmless, so trusting, so completely unaware that he was surrounded by potential enemies. The ceremony ended with traditional wishes for prosperity and peace. Representatives from dozens of species mingled and celebrated, discussing trade agreements and cultural exchanges. The humans, as always, were friendly and welcoming to everyone they met. Supreme Chancellor Thexvar watched Ambassador Kang Wu laugh at something another delegate had said. The human looked so ordinary, so unremarkable. It was almost insulting that the galaxy's oldest law was designed to protect such an obviously weak species. Soon, Thexvar whispered to himself, the galaxy will learn that some rules are meant to be broken. 6 months had passed since the ceremony on Nexus Prime. The galaxy continued its peaceful routine of trade, diplomacy, and cultural exchange. Most species had already forgotten about the ancient rule mentioned by Elder Counselor Vextai. But the Zelthari had not forgotten. They had been very busy. Captain Park Su stood on the bridge of his exploration vessel, the Dauntless, reviewing routine patrol reports. The ship moved slowly through the outer rim territories, checking on research stations and monitoring trade routes. It was quiet work, the kind that most military officers found boring. Park Su had always enjoyed it. He liked visiting the small research outposts and talking with the scientists about their discoveries. Captain, his communications officer, called out, "We're receiving a distress signal from Research Station Gamma 7. Park Su frowned. Gamma 7 was one of the newer installations built around an ancient alien ruin that scientists found fascinating. Dr. Choi Bin had been working there for months, studying artifacts that might be thousands of years old. Put it through. The message was broken and filled with static, but the words were clear enough. Under attack, unknown ships, please send help. Set course for Gamma 7, maximum speed, Park Su ordered. The Dauntless turned and accelerated, but it would take them 4 hours to reach the station. Park Su hoped they wouldn't be too late. They were too late. When the Dauntless arrived at the coordinates, they found only debris floating in space. The research station had been completely destroyed. Emergency pods drifted among the wreckage, but when Park Su's crew brought them aboard, they found only bodies. 43 scientists and support staff had died in the attack. Any idea who did this? Park Soo asked his tactical officer. The weapon signatures match Krillian energy cannons, the officer reported. Looks like a pirate raid, sir. They probably thought the station had valuable artifacts to steal. Park Soo nodded, but something felt wrong. The Krillians were raiders. Yes, but they usually took prisoners to sell as slaves. They didn't typically kill everyone and destroy everything. This felt more like a military strike than a robbery. 2 days later, another distress call came through. Research Station Delta 12 was under attack. Once again, the Dauntless rushed to help, and once again they arrived to find only wreckage and bodies. The weapon signatures were the same. Krillian energy cannons. Park Soo reported both attacks to Galactic Council headquarters. Within hours, Ambassador Kang Wu was on his way back from Earth to deal with what everyone assumed was an outbreak of Krillian piracy. The Council began preparing diplomatic protests and trade sanctions against the Krillian Empire, but far from the main shipping lanes in a region of space that few people ever visited, someone else was investigating the attacks with much more suspicion. Li Na floated her small trading ship near the ruins of Research Station Alpha 3, the third human installation to be destroyed in less than a week. To anyone watching, she appeared to be just another trader looking for salvage among the debris. Her ship's sensors, however, were far more advanced than they appeared. Li Na had been working undercover in this region for 2 years, officially as an independent trader but actually as an intelligence officer for Earth Security Services. She had watched the Zelthari expand their territory and had noticed their growing interest in human space. When the attacks began, she decided to investigate on her own. Computer, scan for energy residue patterns, she commanded quietly. Scanning. Complete, the ship's AI responded. Krillian energy signatures confirmed. However, there are also trace amounts of Zelthari quantum particles consistent with their stealth technology. Li Na felt her blood run cold. Quantum particles were like fingerprints. Each species' technology left unique traces that couldn't be faked. If Zelthari particles were present at the attack site, it meant Zelthari ships had been here. But why? Would they hide while Krillians attacked human stations, unless the Krillians hadn't been here at all? Computer, analyze the Krillian energy signatures. Compare them to known authentic Krillian weapons. Several minutes passed before the AI responded. Analysis complete. The energy signatures match Krillian patterns, but there are subtle variations in the quantum resonance frequencies. These signatures could be artificially generated by advanced holographic technology. Li Na realized she was looking at evidence of a false flag operation. Someone had disguised their ships to look like Krillian raiders and attacked human research stations. The Zelthari particles suggested who that someone might be. She quickly gathered samples of the quantum residue and began the long journey back to Council space. But as her ship prepared to jump to hyperspace, she detected movement in the nearby asteroid field. A ship was hiding there, watching the wreckage site. Li Na quietly activated her ship's passive sensors and enhanced visual systems. The hidden ship was sleek and dark, clearly designed for stealth operations. Its configuration didn't match any known Krillian vessel, but it did look similar to ships she had seen in Zelthari military databases. As she watched, the mystery ship deployed a small probe toward the wreckage. The probe began collecting debris and energy readings, presumably to ensure that the false evidence was convincing. Li Na recorded everything, then carefully moved her ship away before the Watchers could detect her. Meanwhile, in Zelthari space, Supreme Chancellor Thexavar was meeting with Admiral Kolmesh in a secured chamber deep beneath the capital city. Holographic displays showed the locations of all 3 successful attacks, along with detailed plans for future operations. The galaxy believes the Krillians are responsible, Admiral Kolmesh reported with satisfaction. Our stealth ships were able to plant false evidence and withdraw without being detected. The weapon signatures are perfect copies of Krillian technology. And the human response? Thexvar asked. Exactly as predicted. They're calling for council intervention and diplomatic solutions. No increase in military patrols, no enhanced security measures. They still believe they're safe under the protection of galactic law. Thexvar smiled. Humans were so predictable. They thought that laws and treaties could protect them from species that were willing to break those laws. The Zelthari had studied human psychology extensively and understood their greatest weakness. They genuinely believed that other species shared their desire for peace. Phase 2 can begin, Thexvar decided. Target the remaining research stations, but space the attacks out over several weeks. We want this to look like an escalating pirate campaign, not a coordinated military operation. And make sure our agents in Council Space continue spreading rumors about Krillian aggression. What about the other species installations in the region? Admiral Kolmesh asked. If we only attack human targets, someone might become suspicious. Good point. Hit a few Altarian mining platforms and a Centaurian trade depot. Make it look like the Krillians are attacking anyone they consider weak. But focus primarily on human targets. They're the ones we need to eliminate. Agent Yathara, who had been listening silently, finally spoke. I've been monitoring human communications. They're not increasing their military presence in the outer rim. Ambassador Kang Wu is still trying to solve this through diplomacy. They're even offering to mediate peace talks between the Council and the Krillian Empire. All three Zelthari laughed at this news. Even while under attack, humans were trying to make peace with their supposed attackers. It was almost too easy. Continue monitoring their responses, Thexvar ordered. If they show any signs of suspicion about our involvement, we may need to accelerate our timeline. The final phase of the operation will require precise timing. As the meeting ended, none of the Zelthari noticed the small quantum sensor that Agent Yathara had accidentally carried into the secured chamber. The sensor, disguised as a piece of jewelry, had been recording everything for the past hour. Its data would soon be transmitted to a receiver hidden in a nearby asteroid field, and from there to a ship registered as a simple cargo hauler. Li Na's investigation was about to get much more interesting. Back on the bridge of the Dauntless, Captain Park Su stared at the latest intelligence reports. 7 human installations had now been destroyed, with over 300 people killed. The attack seemed random, but something about the pattern bothered him. The targeted stations were all research facilities, not military bases or high-value, economic targets. Why would pirates focus on scientists studying ancient ruins? Sir, his tactical officer reported, we're receiving new orders from Earth Command. We're to return to the Sol system immediately for special assignment. Park Su raised an eyebrow. In all his years of service, he had never been recalled from patrol duty without explanation. Something big was happening, something that required his specific skills and experience. As the Dauntless changed course toward Earth, Park Su couldn't shake the feeling that the galaxy was about to change in ways that no one expected. The ancient rule that Vextai had mentioned at the ceremony suddenly seemed much more relevant than it had 6 months ago. Somewhere in the darkness between stars, the first phase of the Zelthari plan was complete, but they had made one crucial mistake. They had underestimated exactly how closely humans watched their own people, and how quickly they could recognize a threat disguised as coincidence. The Zelthari fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Sol system with the confidence of predators approaching helpless prey. Admiral Kolmesh stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching his tactical displays with satisfaction. 47. Ships of the line, disguised with holographic projectors to look like Krillian raiders, were more than enough to overwhelm Earth's modest defenses. Target analysis complete, his tactical officer reported. We're detecting minimal orbital platforms around Earth. No significant military presence. The planet appears to be defended by only 12 patrol ships and a few automated defense satellites. Admiral Kolmesh smiled beneath his helmet. His intelligence reports had been accurate. Humans really were as unprepared as they appeared. This would be the easiest conquest in Zelthari history. Begin the attack, he ordered. Remember, we need to make this look like a Krillian revenge raid for the trade sanctions. Hit military targets first, then civilian infrastructure. Leave enough evidence to convince investigators that Earth fell to pirate aggression. The fleet moved forward in perfect formation, weapons charging and targeting systems locking onto their objectives. Admiral Kolmesh felt the satisfaction of a plan perfectly executed. In a few hours, The human homeworld would be a smoking ruin, and the galaxy would blame the Krillians for the tragedy. Then everything went wrong. "Admiral," his sensor operator called out in confusion, "I'm reading massive energy signatures around Earth. They're not showing up on visual scans, but the quantum detectors are going crazy." "Elaborate," Admiral Kolmesh demanded. "Sir, there are at least 50 large objects in orbit around Earth that we didn't detect during our approach. They're using some kind of advanced cloaking technology. And Admiral, they're much larger than our intelligence suggested. Some of these structures are bigger than our entire flagship." As if responding to their discovery, space around Earth began to shimmer. One by one, enormous defensive platforms materialized out of nowhere, their hulls gleaming with unknown metals and bristling with weapon arrays that made Zelthari technology look primitive. The patrol ships that had seemed so small suddenly revealed themselves to be massive dreadnoughts, their true size hidden by sophisticated holographic disguises. "This is impossible," Admiral Kolmesh whispered. "Our spies have been watching this system for months. These installations weren't here, but they were here, and they were powering up weapons that the Zelthari had never seen before." Energy readings spiked across the Admiral's displays as targeting systems locked onto every ship in his fleet. "Incoming transmission," the communications officer reported. "It's coming from everywhere, sir. Every platform is broadcasting the same signal." "Put it through." Captain Park Su's voice filled the bridge, calm and professional despite the circumstances. "This is Admiral Park Su of the Terran Defense Force. You are in violation of galactic law and human sovereignty. Power down your weapons and prepare to be escorted out of this system. This is your only warning." Admiral Kolmesh laughed, though it sounded forced even to his own ears. "Admiral, our intelligence said he was just an exploration captain. And how can Earth have a defense force we've never heard of?" "Sir," his tactical officer interrupted, "we're receiving identification codes from those platforms. They're registering as Research Station Gamma 7, Delta 12, Alpha 3, and others. But sir, those stations were destroyed weeks ago." The horrible truth began to dawn on Admiral Kolmesh. The research stations hadn't been destroyed at all. They had been military installations disguised as civilian targets, and the Zelthari had been allowed to attack empty holographic projections while the real stations relocated to Earth orbit. "We walked into a trap," he realized. Another voice joined the communication channel, this one familiar from diplomatic meetings. Ambassador Kang Wu spoke with none of his usual diplomatic politeness. "Admiral Kolmesh, Supreme Chancellor Thexavar, asked me to give you a message. He said to tell you that some ancient rules exist for very good reasons." "Impossible," Admiral Kolmesh snarled. "Our communications are encrypted. There's no way you could know what the Chancellor said." A new voice answered him, Agent Yathara, speaking from what should have been a secure Zelthari facility. "Actually, Admiral, human intelligence has been listening to your conversations for months. My name is Li Na, and I've been working undercover in your operation since the beginning." Admiral Kolmesh's blood ran cold. If their spy was actually a human agent, then everything they had planned was known. Every strategy, every secret, every detail of their conspiracy had been reported back to Earth. "You're lying," he said, but his voice lacked conviction. "Am I?" Lena's voice was amused. "Then how do I know about your plan to blame the Krillians? How do I know about the false quantum signatures? How do I know that you're planning to make this look like a revenge attack for trade sanctions that don't actually exist?" The Zelthari fleet found itself surrounded by firepower they couldn't comprehend, facing an enemy that knew their every move before they made it. But Admiral Kolmesh was a military officer, trained never to surrender. He decided to fight his way out. "All ships open fire," he commanded. The Zelthari fleet unleashed everything they had. Energy beams and missile barrages struck the human platforms with the force of small stars. The space around Earth lit up with explosions and weapon discharges as 47 warships emptied their arsenals in a desperate attempt to break free. When the light faded, the human defensive platforms hung in space without a scratch. Their shields hadn't even flickered under the assault. "Now that's interesting," Admiral Park Su commented over the communication channel. Our intelligence suggested your weapons were more advanced than that. Perhaps we overestimated Zelthari technology. Impossible, Admiral Kolmesh repeated. But now it was a whisper of defeat rather than denial. One of the human platforms fired a single shot. It wasn't aimed at any of the Zelthari ships, but rather at a small asteroid in the outer system. The asteroid, which had been roughly the size of the Zelthari flagship, simply ceased to exist. No explosion, no debris field. It was there one moment and gone the next. That was a demonstration, Admiral Parksu explained. Your fleet is now completely disabled. Your weapons, engines, and life support systems are functioning only because we choose to allow it. If you attempt any hostile action, we will respond appropriately. Admiral Kolmesh looked at his tactical displays and confirmed the impossible. His ship's systems were still running, but they were no longer under his control. Somehow the humans had taken command of every vessel in his fleet without him even noticing. How? He asked weakly. The same way we've been monitoring your communications and tracking your movements for the past 6 months, Li Na answered. Humans have been in this galaxy for a very long time, Admiral. Much longer than most species realize. We've had plenty of time to learn about everyone else's technology. Dr. Choibin's voice joined the conversation, and Admiral Kolmesh recognized the name as one of the researchers supposedly killed in the first attack. Actually, Admiral, while you thought you were studying ancient artifacts, I was studying your ships. Every Zelthari vessel that visited our research stations was quietly scanned and analyzed. We know your technology better than you do. The scope of the deception was staggering. The Zelthari had believed they were the hunters, stalking unsuspecting prey. Instead, they had been the prey all along, watched and studied by predators they never suspected existed. But why? Admiral Kolmesh asked. If you knew about our plan from the beginning, why didn't you stop us sooner? Why let us come all the way to Earth? Ambassador Kang Wu answered, and his voice carried a weight that hadn't been there during diplomatic meetings. Because we needed to know how far you were willing to go. We needed to understand whether the Zelthari Republic could be trusted with membership in the Galactic Council. Unfortunately, you've answered that question very clearly. Around the Earth system, more ships began decloaking. Not dozens, but hundreds. Vessels of sizes and configurations that shouldn't have been possible were appearing from hiding places throughout the solar system. The human fleet that revealed itself was larger than the combined navies of the 3 biggest species in the galaxy. The ancient rule exists for a reason, Admiral Parksu said quietly. Elder Counselor Vextai tried to warn you, but you chose not to listen. Now you'll learn why every species that has survived in this galaxy knows better than to betray the humans. Admiral Kolmesh slumped in his command chair, finally understanding that he had led his fleet not to an easy victory, but to complete defeat. The humans hadn't just outmaneuvered them. They had been playing a completely different game, by rules the Zelthari never knew existed. And somewhere in the back of his mind, a terrible thought was forming. If humans had been hiding this much military power, this much technological advancement, this much intelligence capability, what else were they hiding? And what would happen to the Zelthari Republic now that they had broken the oldest rule in the galaxy? Elder Counselor Vextai's ancient voice echoed across the Sol system, broadcasting on all frequencies so that every ship, every station, and every listening post in the galaxy could hear his words. The old Catherian had waited thousands of years for this moment, hoping it would never come, but prepared for when it inevitably would. Children of the stars, he began, his voice heavy with the weight of forgotten history. Today you witness the breaking of the oldest law in our galaxy. Today, you learn why that law existed, and why some of us who remember have spent millennia ensuring it was never broken. Admiral Kolmesh sat in his disabled flagship, listening with growing dread as the elder began to speak of things that no history book contained. No data archive recorded, no species remembered except the very oldest. 3,000 years ago, before the Galactic Council existed, before most of your civilizations had left their homeworlds, our galaxy faced extinction. A race calling themselves the Devourers swept across the stars like a plague of locusts, consuming everything in their path. On the bridge of his command platform, Admiral Parksu listened to the story he had heard only in classified briefings. Most humans didn't know their own history either. The truth had been hidden so deeply that even Earth's own people had forgotten what their ancestors had done. The Devourers were not conquerors in any sense you would understand, Vextai continued. They did not want territory or resources or slaves. They wanted to consume. They fed on the life force of entire worlds, leaving behind dead planets and empty space. They had no interest in negotiation, no concept of mercy, no possibility of reasoning with them. Lena, still maintaining her cover as Agent Yathara, sat in the Zelthari intelligence facility and watched her colleagues' faces grow pale as they began to understand the magnitude of what they had done. The ancient truth was finally being revealed, and it was more terrible than anyone had imagined. One by one, the great civilizations fell. Vextai's voice carried across the void. The Altarian Star Empire with their million-ship fleets, the Centaurian Collective with their planet-sized battle stations, the First Catherian Republic with technology that seemed like magic to younger races. None of it mattered. The Devourers consumed them all. Dr. Choi Bin, monitoring the broadcast from his research vessel, pulled up holographic displays showing archaeological evidence that few people had ever been allowed to see. Dead worlds scattered across the galaxy, their surfaces still bearing the scars of an ancient war that had raged for centuries. When the Devourers reached 90% of known space, Vextai continued, when the remaining free peoples numbered in the billions instead of trillions, when hope itself seemed to be dying, we encountered a small blue world in an unremarkable star system. The beings there called themselves humans, and they said something that no one had said in decades of losing wars. We can win this. Supreme Chancellor Thexvar, listening from his capital world, felt his certainty crumbling. This couldn't be true. Humans were weak, peaceful, naive. They couldn't have fought in any war, let alone won one against an enemy that had conquered most of the galaxy. We thought they were mad, Vextai admitted. Their technology was primitive compared to ours. Their numbers were tiny. Their weapons were crude. But they had something that all our advanced civilizations had lost. They understood that some enemies cannot be reasoned with, cannot be bargained with, and cannot be allowed to exist. The Elder's voice grew stronger as he spoke of those desperate times. The humans studied the Devourers like no one else had. While we focused on their weapons and ships, humans focused on their minds. While we tried to build stronger defenses, humans learned to think like predators. While we hoped for diplomatic solutions, humans planned for total war. Ambassador Kang Wu listened to the story of his own species' greatest triumph and darkest hour. The war against the Devourers had lasted 2 centuries, and it had changed humanity forever. The peaceful, curious explorers who had first left Earth had become something harder, more dangerous, more capable of making the terrible choices that survival sometimes required. The humans did something that no other species had attempted, Vextai explained. They turned the Devourers' own nature against them. They learned to mimic their feeding patterns, to predict their movements, to understand their weaknesses. And slowly, world by world, system by system, the humans began to win. The space around Earth was silent except for the Elder's voice, but that silence was filled with the weight of revelation. Species that had never heard this story were learning why their ancestors had sworn the ancient oath. Races that had forgotten were remembering why they had once feared to even speak of betraying humanity. The final battle lasted 50 years, Vextai said. 50 years of fighting across 100 star systems, with the survival of all thinking, life hanging in the balance. The humans led a coalition of the last free peoples against an enemy that had never known defeat. And when it was over, when the last Devourer ship was destroyed, when the galaxy was finally safe, the humans made a choice that defined who they would become. Admiral Kolmesh realized he was holding his breath, waiting to hear what that choice had been. They could have ruled us all, Vextai revealed. Their military was the strongest, their technology had advanced beyond ours during the war, their leaders were the most experienced commanders in the galaxy. We would have followed them anywhere, done anything they asked. But instead they said something that shocked us. We want to go home and forget this ever happened. The irony was not lost on anyone listening. The species that had saved the galaxy wanted nothing more than to pretend they hadn't. The humans asked us to promise them something, Vextai continued. They wanted their children to grow up in a peaceful galaxy, never knowing what their parents had been forced to become during the war. They wanted to rebuild their civilization as explorers and diplomats and scientists, not as the galaxy's greatest warriors. They wanted to forget the necessary horrors they had committed to save us all. Li Na understood now why human intelligence operations were so thorough, why their monitoring networks were so extensive, why they seemed to know everything that happened in the galaxy. They weren't spying out of aggression or ambition. They were watching to make sure they never again had to become what they had once been. We agreed to their request, Vextai said, but we also made our own promise. We swore that if anyone ever threatened the humans, if anyone ever forced them to remember what they could become, then all the free peoples of the galaxy would stand against that threat. The rule was written in gratitude, sealed in blood, and maintained in hope that it would never be needed. The elder's voice grew stern as he addressed the Zelthari fleet directly. But some species forget the lessons of history. Some believe that peace is weakness, that mercy is foolishness, that ancient laws are mere superstition. The Zelthari Republic chose to test whether the oldest rule in the galaxy still had meaning. Supreme Chancellor Thexvar wanted to deny it, to claim that this was all elaborate fiction. But the evidence was overwhelming. The human fleet surrounding his disabled ships was proof enough that humanity had been hiding capabilities beyond imagination. And if they had been hiding their military strength for 3,000 years, the humans kept their word, Vextai concluded. For 3 millennia, they have been the galaxy's patient guardians, watching and protecting while pretending to be nothing more than another peaceful species. They have intervened in conflicts without taking credit, prevented wars without claiming glory, and maintained peace while allowing others to believe they were responsible for their own safety. Dr. Choi Bin activated another display, this one showing subtle interventions throughout galactic history. Pirate fleets that had mysteriously disappeared before attacking civilian targets. Aggressive species whose expansion had suddenly halted due to technical problems. Wars that had ended abruptly when key leaders had unexpected changes of heart. All of it had been human work, done so quietly that no one realized who was responsible. But now the pretense is over, Vextai announced. The Zelthari have forced humanity to reveal themselves, to remember what they once were, and could be again. The galaxy will have to learn to live with the knowledge that we have never truly been safe on our own. We have been safe because humanity chose to protect us. Admiral Park Su finally spoke, his voice carrying across all channels. The Zelthari fleet will be escorted to Council space for trial. Their actions have violated not just galactic law, but the fundamental trust that allows our civilization to exist. However, we are not the same species that fought the Devourers. We do not seek vengeance or conquest. We seek only to ensure that this never happens again. The weight of 3,000 years of hidden history settled over the galaxy like a heavy blanket. Every species that had thought they understood how the universe worked was discovering that they had been children playing in a garden, protected by guardians they never knew existed. And in the deepest archives of human space, in files that no one but the highest leaders had ever seen, other secrets waited. Because the story Vextai had told was true, but it was not complete. The Devourers had been defeated but not destroyed. They had been contained. The Great Chamber on Nexus Prime had never been so quiet. Representatives from every species in the galaxy sat in stunned silence as they watched the holographic displays showing the disabled Zelthari fleet being escorted by human ships that dwarfed anything they had thought possible. The revelation of humanity's true nature had shaken the foundations of everything they believed about their civilization. Supreme Chancellor Thexvar stood in the center of the chamber, no longer the confident leader who had arrived 6 months earlier. His fleet was captured, his conspiracy exposed, and his people faced the judgment of the entire galaxy. But worse than any of that was the knowledge that he had nearly doomed every living being in the universe. Admiral Park Su's image appeared on the main display, broadcasting from the bridge of his flagship. He looked exactly as he had during his exploration missions, calm, professional, and seemingly ordinary. But now everyone knew that this unremarkable-looking human commanded military forces that could reshape the galaxy. The Galactic Council will decide the fate of the Zelthari Republic, Park Su announced. However, before that judgment is made, there are things you must understand about what their actions have risked. Elder Counselor Vextai moved slowly to his speaking position, his ancient form showing the weight of knowledge that few beings in the galaxy possessed. The history I shared with you was true, but it was not complete. The Devourers were not destroyed 3,000 years ago. They were contained. A ripple of fear passed through the assembled delegates. The idea that humanity had hidden their strength was shocking enough, but the possibility that an ancient enemy still existed was terrifying. The war against the Devourers ended not with their extinction, but with their imprisonment, Vextai explained. Using technologies that took centuries to develop, humanity built barriers around the dark spaces between galaxies, creating a prison that could hold beings that fed on life itself. Dr. Choi Bin appeared on a secondary display, standing in what looked like a vast control room filled with monitoring equipment. For 3,000 years, human scientists and engineers have maintained the containment systems. Every research station, every exploration mission, every seemingly innocent scientific outpost has been part of a galaxy-wide network designed to ensure the prison holds. The terrible truth was becoming clear. Humanity's role as peaceful explorers had been a cover for their real job as the galaxy's guardians, maintaining defenses against an enemy that most species had never heard of. The research stations that the Zelthari attacked, Dr. Choi Bin continued, were monitoring posts, checking for signs that the containment might be weakening. When those posts went dark even temporarily, it created gaps in our surveillance network, gaps that the Devourers could exploit. Li Na's voice joined the discussion from her position aboard a Zelthari vessel. During my infiltration of Zelthari operations, I discovered that their attacks had been precisely targeted. They weren't random raids, they were strikes against critical monitoring stations. Whether they knew it or not, the Zelthari were weakening. The barriers that keep the Devourers imprisoned. Supreme Chancellor Thexvar felt his legs give out beneath him. He collapsed into his chair as he realized that his plan for galactic domination had nearly resulted in the release of an enemy that could consume all life in the universe. His species' ambition had almost doomed everything that existed. But the damage has been contained, Ambassador Kang Wu announced as he joined the conference. Human backup systems activated the moment our primary monitoring posts were attacked. The Devourers remain imprisoned, and the barriers remain strong. A delegate from the Altarian Federation raised a trembling appendage. How many of you knew? How many humans were aware of this deception? Kang Wu considered the question carefully. Most humans know nothing of our true history. They live peaceful lives on peaceful worlds, exploring the galaxy and conducting research and building families just as they appear to. Only a few thousand of us carry the burden of knowledge, and only a few hundred maintain the containment systems directly. The deception was necessary, Park Su added. If the galaxy knew that such an enemy existed, panic would spread. Wars would break out as species fought for the safest territories. Unity would collapse into chaos, and that chaos would weaken us exactly when we needed to be strongest. Elder Counselor Vextai gestured to the displays showing the massive human fleet. But now the secret is exposed. The galaxy must learn to live with the knowledge that our safety depends on humanity's vigilance, and humanity must learn to live without the peaceful anonymity they have treasured. A long moment of silence passed as the implications sank in. Every species in the galaxy now knew that their survival depended on maintaining good relations with a people they had thought were unremarkable neighbors. What happens to us? Thexvar asked, his voice barely above a whisper. That depends on your choices going forward, Kang Wu replied. The Zelthari Republic can choose to learn from this mistake and become trusted allies in maintaining galactic security, or you can face the consequences of threatening the stability that protects us all. Park Su leaned forward in his display. We're not interested in revenge or punishment for its own sake. We're interested in ensuring this never happens again. The galaxy needs unity, cooperation, and trust. The Zelthari can be part of that future, but only if you prove you understand what's at stake. Thexvar looked around the chamber at the faces, staring at him. Some showed anger, others showed fear, but many showed something else. Hope that his people could redeem themselves and become part of the solution rather than part of the problem. We will do whatever is required, he said, finally. Our technology, our fleets, our resources, everything we have will be placed at the service of galactic security. We will spend whatever time is necessary, earning back the trust we have betrayed. That's a beginning, Vextai acknowledged. But trust, once broken, takes time to repair. The Zelthari will need to prove their commitment through actions, not just words. Dr. Choibin spoke up from his control room. There is useful work for reformed enemies. The monitoring network can always use additional sensors and personnel. Zelthari technology, properly directed, could strengthen the containment systems and provide early warning of future threats. The discussion continued for hours as the Council worked out the details of how the galaxy would function with this new knowledge. Trade agreements were modified to account for humanity's real capabilities. Defense treaties were rewritten to acknowledge their role as protectors. Cultural exchange programs were expanded to help other species understand human psychology and motivations. But in a private chamber far from the main discussions, Vextai met alone with Ambassador Kang Wu to discuss the deepest secrets of all. The containment is weakening, isn't it? Vextai asked quietly. Kang Wu nodded grimly. Not because of the Zelthari attacks, though those didn't help. The barriers were designed to last 3,000 years, and we're approaching that limit. Even with constant maintenance and upgrades, the prison won't hold forever. How long do we have? Centuries, maybe a millennium if we're lucky and work very hard, but eventually we'll need a permanent solution. Something more than just keeping them locked away. Vextai's ancient eyes showed deep sadness. I had hoped our species would have more time to grow, to learn, to become strong enough to face that challenge when it comes. Perhaps this crisis will help, Kang Wu suggested. Now that the galaxy knows the truth, we can work together on developing new technologies and strategies. The Zelthari betrayal may have actually made us stronger in the long run. The old Catherian looked at the human ambassador with something approaching wonder. Even now, after everything that has happened, you still believe in the possibility of peace and cooperation. That optimism may be humanity's greatest strength. Or our greatest weakness, Kang Wu admitted. But it's who we are. It's who we chose to become after the war ended. And it's who will remain no matter what challenges we face in the future. As the formal council session ended and delegates began returning to their worlds, the galaxy began adjusting to its new reality. Children who had grown up thinking humans were just another peaceful species learned about the guardians who had protected them all their lives. Scientists gained access to technologies they had never imagined. Military leaders began planning for threats they had never considered. The ancient rule, never betray the humans, was no longer just a law to be followed. It was understood as the fundamental principle that kept civilization itself alive. And for the first time in 3,000 years, humanity's vigil was no longer a lonely one. But in the dark spaces between galaxies, something stirred. The containment. Barriers held firm, but the devourers had felt the momentary weakening when the monitoring stations went dark. They had tasted the possibility of freedom, and they had not forgotten. The galaxy had survived the breaking of its oldest rule, but greater challenges lay ahead. At least now, when those challenges came, they would face them together.